The morning began with an eerie stillness, the kind that settled before catastrophe. The air over Ypres hung heavy, motionless, and quiet enough for the men to hear their own uneasy breaths. Sergeant Thomas Avery crouched in the trench, wiping grime from his face with a sleeve stiff from weeks of mud and sweat. Around him, his platoon murmured in low voices, some smoking, some praying, all pretending not to feel the dread that slithered through their bones. A faint mist hovered on the horizon. Pale, unnatural, crawling along the ground like a living thing. "Do you see that?" whispered Private Larkin, his voice trembling. Avery raised his field glasses. What he saw made his stomach turn. The Germans had opened the valves. A thick, yellow-green cloud was rolling toward them, devouring the fields, swallowing the shattered remnants of trees, and creeping over corpses that hadn't yet been buried. "Gas!" Avery roared. "Masks! Get your bloody masks on, now!" Chaos erupted. Men fumbled for their respirators, some dropping them in panic. The hiss of escaping gas filled the air like the whisper of death itself. The smell came next, sharp, metallic, and suffocating, a burning that clawed down the throat and into the lungs. Those who were too slow screamed as the poison reached them. Their cries were wet, bubbling, and short-lived. The gas showed no mercy. It crept into every hole, every crevice, every unsealed mask. Avery's vision blurred as he pulled his own mask tight. His breath echoed inside, shallow and fast. The world outside turned into a nightmare haze, a green fog where shapes of men stumbled, fell, and never rose again. "Stay low," he shouted, his voice muffled by rubber and fear. "Stay together!" But the line was broken. The trench filled with gas like a coffin filling with water. Hours later, silence returned, the kind of silence that came only after death had taken its fill. Avery pushed himself upright, coughing violently as he adjusted his mask. Around him, only 4 men still moved. Larkin, Burns, Mackenzie, and Corporal Price, who clutched his rifle like it was a child he had to protect. "Anyone else?" Avery rasped. Burns shook his head. "They're all gone, Sarge. The gas took them." Avery stared down the length of the trench. Dozens of bodies lay twisted in unnatural shapes, some with masks still half on, eyes wide and glassy. The green haze was thinning now, drifting toward the sky, leaving only its stench and its silence. They couldn't stay. The gas could return with the wind, and the Germans might soon advance behind it. Avery made a decision. "We move out. Grab your rifles. We'll make for the ridge, get high ground and clean air." The men followed, stumbling through the trenches, their boots sloshing in foul water. Every breath burned. Every step was heavy. The world looked dead, no birds, no sound, only the endless grey sky over the wasteland that had once been a battlefield. As they climbed out, they saw it, the true horror. Fields once green were now a graveyard. Bodies lay scattered, their skin blistered, their uniforms burned from the gas. Horses lay stiff beside shattered wagons. The air shimmered with invisible poison. Mackenzie gagged behind his mask. "God forgive them, what kind of man makes this?" Avery didn't answer. There was no answer to give. They trudged on, the world around them turning surreal, like they'd stepped into hell itself. Their boots left prints in the oily mud, the same mud that had swallowed their comrades. The sky dimmed with the approach of night, but the green vapor still lingered in the lowlands, glowing faintly like some sickly ghost. By dusk, they reached the remains of a farmhouse, half collapsed, its roof caved in and walls splintered by shellfire. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. Inside, they tore off their masks, gasping for fresher air. The sweet sting of oxygen made their chests ache. Burns collapsed against a wall, wheezing. "I can still taste it," he said. "It's like it's inside me." "It is," Price muttered. "That's the worst part." They all sat there for a while, too weak to speak. Avery's thoughts drifted, to the faces of the men they'd lost, to the horror of what they'd just seen, to the quiet question that haunted him since the war began. How much more can a man endure before he stops being a man? Outside, night fell over the poisoned earth. And in the darkness, they heard faint sounds, the coughs of dying men, carried by the wind. Avery looked out through a crack in the wall. In the distance, the horizon glowed faintly green, like the edge of a storm that never ended. He whispered to himself, voice shaking, "We've seen the future, and it smells like death." The night was a choking thing, heavy, damp, and too quiet. Every sound made the men flinch. The far-off groan of artillery was a grim lullaby, reminding them that death never truly slept here. Sergeant Avery sat near the farmhouse doorway, his rifle across his knees, eyes fixed on the distant haze. The stars were dim behind the smoke, and the moon, pale and warped by drifting gas, hung like a dying lantern over the battlefield. Behind him, the men tried to rest, but none could truly sleep. The gas had left their throats raw, their lungs aching. Every cough sounded like it might be their last. Private Larkin broke the silence first. His voice was soft, hoarse. "Do you think they'll use it again, Sarge?" Avery didn't look back. "They will. Once a man finds a way to kill without facing who he kills, he'll never stop using it." Larkin swallowed, staring at his trembling hands. "I can still feel it burning. Even when I breathe clean air. Like it's still inside me." Price shifted in the corner. "That's a cause it is," he muttered darkly. "That stuff don't wash out. Not from your skin. Not from your soul." The young private nodded solemnly. "Think anyone will remember us when this is over?" Avery looked out toward the horizon, where the gas still drifted like a haunting memory. "If they do," he said softly, "they'll remember what this war turned men into, and maybe, God willing, what it didn't take away." The men stood in silence. The sky above them was grey, endless, and scarred, yet for a brief moment, Avery swore he could feel a flicker of warmth through the chill. The war had taken their friends, their strength, their innocence. But not, at least not yet, their humanity. And so they picked up their rifles, adjusted their masks, and walked back toward the line, into the green death once more. The march back toward the front line was slow and silent. The morning fog clung to the broken trees and shell holes, wrapping everything in a ghostly shroud. Each step squelched in the poisoned mud. Every man wore his mask now, not just for protection, but because it hid the fear in their eyes. Sergeant Avery led them carefully through the twisted remnants of what once had been a wheat field. Now it was nothing but churned earth and bones. Crows perched on broken helmets, their calls echoing through the emptiness. Private Burns coughed inside his mask. "Can't see a damn thing, Sarge." "Keep your line," Avery replied, his voice muffled. The air's still thick down in the low ground. "Don't breathe deep." They descended into a shallow depression, a crater left by some enormous shell. The walls were slick with moisture, the bottom filled with stagnant water that glowed faintly green in the sunlight. A thin layer of gas hung above it, drifting lazily like a living thing. Larkin pointed. "Christ, it's still moving." "It's heavier than air," Avery said grimly. "It'll stay down there until the wind changes." As they circled the edge, something caught Avery's boot, a hand, pale and bloated, reaching out from the mud. He froze. Then, slowly, he crouched down. It was another soldier, or what was left of him. His mask was cracked, one lens shattered. The gas had done its work. The skin was blistered and discolored, eyes wide open in eternal terror. Burns muttered a prayer. Poor bastard never had a chance. Avery adjusted the mask on his own face, the rubber pressing tight against his skin. "Let's keep moving. We're close to the supply trench. We'll regroup there." But as they began to climb the ridge, a sound split the silence, a faint, eerie whistle. Then came the hiss. Larkin shouted, "Gas! Gas!" In seconds, yellow-green clouds erupted from the horizon, rolling toward them like a monstrous tide. The men fumbled with their masks, pulling straps tight, sealing filters. The air shimmered, and then the world became pain. Even through the masks, the gas clawed at their lungs. It burned their eyes, seeped through their uniforms, stung every inch of exposed skin. Price stumbled. "It's too thick. We can't stay here." "Up the hill!" Avery shouted, waving his arm. "Move!" They ran, blind, choking, the ground slick beneath them. The gas chased them like a living predator. One man fell, another slipped trying to help him up. The cries were muffled by rubber and panic. A shell exploded nearby, scattering the mist for a heartbeat, and in that flash, Avery saw the outline of the trenches ahead. "Go! That's our line!" They crashed over the parapet, coughing and heaving. The sentries inside the trench recoiled at the sight of them, men covered in mud and green stains, masks blackened, eyes bloodshot. "Get the medics," someone yelled. "They're hit bad." Avery tore off his mask and collapsed against the wall, gasping, his lungs burning as if they'd been set on fire. Around him, the others did the same, retching, coughing up bile. The medic arrived with morphine and bandages, shouting orders. "Keep them sitting up. Don't let them lie down." Avery could barely hear him. His vision swam. Somewhere, he saw Larkin still wearing his mask, trembling violently. The younger man's hands clawed at his throat. Avery crawled toward him, pulling the mask off gently, only to see the burn spreading across the boy's face, the gas eating at the skin like acid. "Easy, son," he whispered. "Breathe slow, breathe slow." Larkin's lips moved. No sound came out. Only tears rolled down his face as he choked on air. Avery held him close, rocking slightly, his own eyes burning. "You're all right, lad, you're all right." But he wasn't. Minutes later, Larkin's body went still. The medic looked at Avery, shaking his head. "He's gone." Avery didn't answer. He just stared at the empty space where the boy's breath had been. That night, the survivors sat in silence. The trenches were quiet except for the occasional distant boom of artillery. Avery opened his notebook, the one he kept hidden inside his tunic. He turned to a blank page and began to write, the pencil shaking in his hand. "They tell us the gas is a weapon. But it's more than that. It's a whisper from the devil himself. It doesn't scream. It doesn't roar. It waits. And when you breathe it in, it takes everything you are." He closed the book and stared out across the dark horizon. Somewhere out there, more clouds were waiting to be released. And he knew, tomorrow, the green death would come again. The dawn came quietly. No bird sang. No wind moved the fog. The sky was the color of cold ash, and the trench lay in eerie stillness, a world caught between life and something less. Sergeant Avery stood alone by the fire step, his mask hanging around his neck. He could still taste the gas on the air, faint but present, a sour ghost clinging to his throat. His uniform was stiff with mud, his hands cracked and raw from the chemicals. Around him, the survivors were few. Burns sat against the wall, wheezing softly, a damp rag pressed to his mouth. Price was asleep, or trying to be, though his sleep was haunted, his body twitching with every distant explosion. Avery looked out across no man's land. The fields were gone now, replaced by pits of water glowing faintly yellow, as though the earth itself was infected. Beyond that, he could see the German line, or what remained of it. Even the enemy seemed to have gone silent. He thought of Larkin, his quiet laughter, his shaking hands, the way he'd still said yes, Sarge, even as his lungs filled with poison. He'd been a good lad. Too good for this place. Avery pulled the small notebook from his pocket again. The edges were soaked and warped, but the pages inside still held his words. He began to write slowly, his pencil scratching softly in the heavy silence. The gas doesn't just take breath. It takes the world with it. It eats the air, the color, the hope. When it passes, what's left behind isn't life, it's something pretending to be. He paused, looking up as the sun struggled to pierce the fog. Its light came weakly, turning the mist gold for just a moment. It almost looked beautiful, until he remembered what that mist carried. Footsteps approached from behind. It was Price, his face pale beneath the grime. "Orders came down, Sarge," he rasped. "We're to hold until relief comes. Could be tomorrow. Could be next week." Avery gave a short, bitter laugh. "Aye. Or never?" Price didn't smile. He looked down at the mud, then back up. "You ever think we'll make it home?" Avery's eye stayed on the horizon. "Home," he let the word hang there for a while. "I think home's something we left the day we got here. Even if we walk through that door again, we won't be the same men who left." Price nodded slowly. "Still, I'd like to see the sea again. Even just once." Avery said nothing. He couldn't tell him that the last time he'd seen the sea, on the transport ship to France, he'd thought the same thing, that the waves looked like freedom. Now they only reminded him of gas clouds rolling low across the fields. A rumble shook the air. Not artillery, deeper, stranger. The kind of sound that made your stomach twist before your mind understood. Then the smell hit them. Sharp. Bitter. Burns shouted, "Gas! Gas again!" They scrambled for their masks. Avery yanked his on, sealing it tight. Price struggled, his strap had torn, but Avery grabbed a spare and shoved it into his hands. The trench filled with panic again. Men shouting, coughing, the air turning to poison before their eyes. The yellow fog crept down like a living tide. Avery couldn't see 10 feet ahead. The world was sound and gas and fear. He felt a hand grab his sleeve, Burns, pulling him toward the dugout. But then came a blast that threw them both to the ground. The shock tore his mask loose. Instantly, it hit, the burn, the sear, the blinding pain. Avery gasped, once, twice, before his lungs caught fire. He clawed at the mask, forcing it back on, but it was too late. The gas had found him. He crawled toward the dugout door, vision blurring, every breath a knife. He fell halfway down the steps, his notebook tumbling from his pocket. He reached for it, hands trembling. He had one last thing to write. One last thing to leave behind. His pencil dragged across the paper, uneven, desperate. "If someone finds this, tell them we were here. Tell them we breathed poison and still prayed. Tell them the air turned against us. But we didn't turn against each other." His hand went still. Outside, the gas drifted on, silent and endless. When the relief troops arrived the next morning, they found Avery and his men exactly as they'd fallen, their masks still in place, their rifles beside them. One of the soldiers bent down, lifting the notebook from Avery's hand. He read the last words slowly, then looked out across the poisoned land. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, quietly, one of them said, "God help us all." The wind shifted. The fog began to lift. And the sun rose weakly over the battlefield, turning the green clouds gold.